Now, as I introduced you earlier, we are going to go to Zimbabwe briefly and find out what exactly it is that is going on in Zimbabwe. As it appears, a joke of a coup, or is it, you don't know how exactly to call it, because it does appear there's some charade going on there. And as we speak, there are protestations now calling for Robert Mugabe to resign. They want him to get out honorably, but his wife is tagged a criminal that needs to be uprooted from the family. And the army appears to have succeeded in doing that so that they can do a transition that does not include Grace Mugabe, Gucci Mugabe, some call her. And then we will get to find out about the special prosecutor, because that law has been passed, was passed on Tuesday, and very soon is going to start to do its work. So let's first of all listen to what members of parliament had to say about the special prosecutor.
This was intended to be passed today so that I can find space in the budget. What has happened tonight is a demonstration of our commitment towards establishing institutions of state that will fight corruption and corruption-related offenses. The MPP, in his manifesto, believed that this institution is important for its fight against corruption. Brought a bill to Parliament for us to consider the establishment of that institution. We've done that. Now the ball is squarely within the court of the MPP, and they have to help the institutions of state, and especially the Office of a Special Prosecutor, to fight corruption.
So it went through a lot of up and downs. Do we have a clean quality bill that can stand the test of time, you think?
I can only re-echo the words of the Attorney General. The efficacy of any bill, the efficacy of any law is tried in the courts. Now, anything can happen. But I can tell you that as a committee, as Parliament, we'll use our best endeavors to ensure that we have a bill that will stand the test of time and meet the reasonable and legitimate expectations of the people of this country.
As soon as his signature is appended, then it is authenticated and it becomes a law and it becomes operational. We'll then be waiting for the nomination, the appointment of the special prosecutor, and the prior approval of the Parliament of Ghana. And he or she starts his work. The office is being established to serve the people of Ghana. The office is not being established to serve only MPP. It is being established to ensure that corruption and corruption-related matters are minimized, or if not nipped in the bud completely.
Right. So you heard members of parliament, starting with the Honorable Inusa Fuseni, speaking about the special prosecutor and giving the assurance, and many of you have been surprised at that he was the one giving the assurance that the special prosecutor will not do a witch hunt, even though he had some little suspicion that that may be possible. And let me quickly introduce my guest for this morning, and then we get the discussion underway. And my guests this morning are people that you are very familiar with. They really don't need any introduction, but for the purposes of this show, I will have to introduce them. So starting from my very extreme right is Nana Oyelita, former Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection. She's been a lawyer practicing for many, many years until she was appointed, and I suspect she put her wig down for a while. Good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Good to have you. And I remember the very last time I had you on this show, It was after election 2012,
Right.
where we all needed to rally around the flag and to get tensions down as the allegations began to fly left, right, center about fraud in the process, which eventually got to the Supreme Court. Right. Now, right by me, on my left, my right still, is yours truly, Clara Berry Kasati. She's a private legal practitioner and teaches the law at GIMPA. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Yes, recently you were giving a lecture and you were seeking to have Ghanaians abroad pay tax.
Yes.
Some people didn't like the idea, but some felt that was also good.
Yes, nobody likes to pay taxes, so it is expected. So tax is a forced payment. Nobody will.
Right.
Yes.
But why should a Ghanaian who lives outside of the country be paying tax here in Ghana when they don't live here?
Because as we have said, under the Constitution, Ghanaians living abroad have rights that they are entitled to exercise.
Okay.
And of course, we all know that government needs revenue to be able to provide those rights. Of course, like we say, we have to look at our history, our state of development, where we are now. Do we have the money that we need? Definitely not. We need to be able to raise more revenue. So it's not out of place for people who are entitled to enjoy certain benefits from the state to contribute towards the state.
You already remit, and at certain points in the history of this country, the remittance alone has been more than we have been able to generate, and even how much Cocoa has given us.
Remittances are not taxes. Remittances are private payments. That is completely different from the idea of taxation.
Okay.
Taxes are compulsory payments. Remittances are not.
Right.
So the ideas are very different, and then at the appropriate time we'll look at the intricacies, but it's the remittances cannot be used to determine whether or not they should pay
You're
taxes.
Professor Chia, right?
Yes.
The title of your project
was a citizenship-based taxation, whether it is outrageous or broadening
we'll
the tax
explore that.
base.
We'll explore that,
Yes.
at the appropriate time, so that all Ghanaians can get to benefit and getting to know why it is important for Ghanaians who live outside of the country to pay tax. And particularly on this platform, you know that there are millions of Ghanaians outside of the country who watch this show. They'll be interested in knowing what they will stand to benefit if they pay tax. Right. Now, also here in the studio and right by me on my left is Sarah Adjoa Safo. She's MP Dome Kwabenya, Deputy Majority Leader and Minister of State in charge of public procurement. She's also a lawyer. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
I'm delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Also, the Honorable Mona Kote is former Deputy Minister of Finance and Managing Partner, BVM Advisory Services. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Samson.
Great.
Thank you for inviting me.
You would say that this is discriminatory because we bring you on the show only when there is budget to talk about? Well, but the truth also is that it's difficult to get you to come to the show. Everybody is busy. Right. Okay, so we start with Zimbabwe. And let's get to hear what, the ladies in the studio have to say about what is going on. In fact, a good friend of mine, he uses the pen name Oyibo. Justice Ramsay writes that this is gender matter at the core, because he feels that they are persecuting Grace Mugabe and getting her out of the way because she's a woman and being unfairly treated. So let me start with Nana Oyelita, who always wears her, gender cap. Right. So,
Yes.
what do you make of what is going on in Zimbabwe now?
Mixed feelings. Mixed feelings. We're seeing the end of an historic era of a Pan-Africanist who really fought against Western domination. We're seeing the dying embers. I mean, mixed feelings because my heart goes out to Robert Mugabe for what he stands for his excellence. But then mixed feelings when I think about all the human rights infractions that have gone on. Mixed feelings when I think about the economy of Zimbabwe and looking at Zimbabwe over the past 4 decades that President Mugabe has been in charge. And we are happy that we are not seeing people out there, killing, the mayhem that goes along with it. We know that it is a power struggle within the ruling political party.
Right.
And we're hoping it stays at that. We're looking at South Africa closely in terms of how they would react, whether they'll still remain the don't see and protective big brother. We are hoping that it ends well. It's obvious that opposition in Zimbabwe is not much to write home about.
Right.
And we're hoping that Robert Mugabe, for whatever he stands for, would be given that grace and that whatever accords to a head of state.
I that you wouldn't say that he deserved any of that or respect, But let me come to you, Honorable Adjo Asafo. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State has urged a quick return to civilian rule, but also said the crisis was an opportunity for Zimbabwe to set itself on a new path. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says Beijing was hoping for stability and a peaceful, appropriate resolution. UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson also warned against a transition from, quote, one unelected tyrant, unquote, to another. And then Botswana's president said regional leaders did not support Mugabe staying in power. Of course, Alpha Conde, the chairman of the African Union, a key regional bloc, said the takeover seems like a coup and demanded a return to constitutional order. The fear, obviously, is that he may be checking out, but not through a constitutional process, the transition.
Samson, thank you, and a very good morning to your viewers, especially the constituents of Domiko Abinya. I believe that in the news, everybody is seeing what's happening in Zimbabwe, and people are not really sure whether to say it's a good thing or to say it's a bad thing, because the feelings are mixed. In one breath, you would see a man.
He's 93. He's ruled the country
I was
for
a kid when I heard of.
years.
I was a kid when I heard of Mugabe, and I have children, and they're grown, and I'm still hearing of Mugabe. So that is one leg of the discussion, whether there's been dictatorship, tyranny, autocracy of the people of Zimbabwe, and whether that is a justification for the outburst of the military to take over and take him out. Again, it is a constitutional state, and one would expect that it will go through the constitutional way to take him out. Right. But we shouldn't lose the fact that they have tried over the period, over the years, to do that through a free, fair, and election, which they have not succeeded in that. And so when people are oppressed, when people feel there's a threat of a monarchy, we're hearing that Mugabe's wife is in preparation to also take over from his husband. You know, this thing about whether there should be a democratic way to hand over power, or there's a monarchy that is being established, which probably their constitutional arrangement or framework doesn't allow for that.
It does appear, though, that preparation to have his wife, succeed him,
and the vice president kicked out,
has been thwarted, because he began it by kicking out the vice president, and they saw what he was doing. Yes. So he was put under house arrest, and then the wife somehow smuggled out some way.
Yes, so something, it takes us back to that argument of whether or not indeed the people have that justification morally. In one breath, you would think they've had him for so many years. Right. And by the nature of human beings, we get fed up with certain things over a period. And this man has been there for decades. So that is one breath. Again, you would look at his Pan-Africanism struggle from the days of the OAU to AU till date, his contribution towards that, and the feel that he has within the African sub-region, that he is a man that stands for Africanism. So, and then in the international, in the Western sphere, how are they perceiving all that is going on in Zimbabwe? Right. I think that whatever it is, Ghana should be grateful to the Almighty that we have a democratic system. We have change in government from one government to the other peacefully and through proper means. But we have a situation in Zimbabwe where it's nearly getting into crisis, like we're having in Kenya now. Kenya was a model for Africa as well, very developed. But we have issues with Kenya, and is even turning into an armed conflict. And that is very worrying.
We as Ghana have always played a leadership role when it comes to these matters. Of course, Mugabe, you know, has his antecedents here. He came to school and all.
And he had a wife.
Yes. Yes.
So we are connected whatever way it is.
So do you expect that Ghana will have any role?
I strongly believe so. I strongly believe so. Once we are part of the regional body of the AU, and even as ECOWAS in the sub-region, whatever we put up there, whatever strategy or engagement that we have, or statement that comes out, will come out very strong, because Ghana is a model for Africa as well, in terms of democracy, in terms of free and fair elections, and in terms of having a peaceful transition from one government to the other.
There are lawyers from that country who are in Ghana now at Labadi, who were part of the International African Bar Association, you know, forum, and they testify to what you just said. They look up to Ghana so much. So I'll come to Madame Mwanakote to find out what you think about he going now. Should he go now for the economic prosperity of his country, because his country has suffered so much under him economically? But Clara, there are 8 out of 10 of the regional chairpersons of the party, his party, who have always been loyal to him, who today have asked him to resign. End of the road for him?
Samson, good morning to your viewers, and happy to be with them once again. Now, with respect to the issues in Zimbabwe, as has already been said, it's mixed feelings. Should he go now? I think we should take a look again at what Robert Mugabe is. You may have your views on what, you may either agree or disagree with him, but you cannot help not to respect him, because we all know what he stands for. He has his own principles. We know what he stands for. We may not agree with him, but you must respect somebody who stands up for their principles. And Robert Mugabe has done that. Let's come again.
It doesn't matter that he stands up for principles and on the basis of that his people suffer and do not have any esteem, you know, as it were.
That one is subject to a lot of debate. Sometimes when statements are bandied around, his people are not happy, his people are not happy, it is very difficult to determine what one really means. How are we able to determine that other countries' people are happier than his people? Remember that I think Zimbabwe has about 70% literacy, much more than Ghana. So in spite of the things that they have certain positives that may not be trumpeted, because Robert Mugabe is not a favorite in many parts of the world. I am not saying I agree or I disagree with him, but at least I know what he stands for, and he's committed to that. But I think for all of us, including Mugabe, we must revisit what he fought for. The reasons for which he stood up and fought for his people. I believe at the core of it was for his people to be able to make their own decisions, for his people to be able to to define their own destiny. So I think at this point, Robert Mugabe and all those who fought for the liberation struggle must allow the people to decide for themselves. This is time for them to take their hands off. I'm sure the people of Zimbabwe are grateful to all the people who fought to have them liberated. But I believe the people of Zimbabwe are entitled to to define their own destiny.
Right.
So I think at this point, Robert Mugabe, well done, but I think he should consider leaving the scene. And I wouldn't agree with any group of people, again, hijacking the situations and determining the pace. I think both the army and Mugabe and all those people who fought and believe in Zimbabwe should believe in the people of Zimbabwe enough and let the people of Zimbabwe decide how they want the future of their country to go.
Interesting. Mona, what do you say? Does an exit for him, suggest some better times for the economy of Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Samson, and good morning to your viewers. The Zimbabwe story has been a sad story for a long time. And I've had the opportunity to buy or acquire a mine when I worked at Ashanti Goldfields in Zimbabwe. Some of us saw Zimbabwe when it was a good and beautiful place to live, good meaning economically strong and so forth. And then we saw a time when some of the citizens, but of different color, were asked to leave. Perhaps for good reason, we don't know. Maybe they were hogging the growth space or whatever. But we all saw Zimbabwe descend to very low state. One would say that with respect to the man, Robert Mugabe, definitely, as Clara said, he must be accorded the respect of being one who fought for independence for Zimbabwe, from South Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. But I think there's been a syndrome of too much of a good thing. Well respected, he's been there. He's done some of the right things that he must do for that nation to grow on its own and be truly independent. But there are different life cycles of a country, of a corporate, of any entity at all. And I'm not sure that he was the right leader for the time of growth for Zimbabwe, for independence, for setting things into place and initiating, yes. But for Zimbabwe to grow, in order for Zimbabwe to grow, it needed a different leadership style. So Robert Mugabe has done his part, and earlier it would have been good for another type of leader to come in to grow that nation, to grow it socially and to grow it economically. We've seen a country that is so rich. Zimbabwe is a rich country in terms of resources, the gold and all that they have there, in terms of even tourism. I mean, it's a beautiful country, and it just, the falls and all of that, I would say it's one of God's countries. Therefore, there was no need for that country to get to the stage where it was, where people would line up for bread, where citizens would only come to the city to work and go back out to poorer areas. And only a certain group of people would enjoy.
And the currency became almost
the
like
currency
paper.
was weak. It was something you would carry in a wheelbarrow. You would go to Zimbabwe and feel that, oh, this was the early 70s in Ghana. Yes. And yet we had all moved on. So I think, as Ajwa said, in the spirit of AU and all of us moving forward, Zimbabwe got delayed because they still had a leader who was leading them using another strategy, a strategy that fits when you've just become independent and you need to establish. They now needed new leaders, a fresh of breath air, younger leaders, I have to say, a much younger leader who would keep Zimbabwe synchronized with the rest of the world. Because at one point, one started to feel that Zimbabwe was disconnected. When you spoke to Zimbabweans who had come to school abroad, you could sense their love for Robert Mugabe, but their wish that their country would keep up with other countries. So both socially, because they really don't have much in terms of social support for their people. And as for economic growth, we all know about it. Most investors would go in, invest, and take the funds out. And that was not good enough. There has to be a government that will work to make that country grow. So I hope that the transition will be a peaceful and constitutional one, right, where Mr. Mugabe himself will resign and allow a new government to be picked. But you didn't mention the military aspect. I believe there was a military aspect to this, because I was listening to BBC. Yes. Hopefully it is not that the military will come to rule, but that they will just facilitate a move to another civilian government.
Okay. Very final comments from Nanoye. And this angle about, you know, suggestions that, you know, Grace Mugabe was the one being prepared to take over. She was not part of the liberation struggle. Perhaps at the time Mugabe was being sworn in as president, she was just a kid. Is it fair?
Or not born.
Yes.
It is totally uncalled for, unwarranted. It is not fair. I mean, whatever role she has played, well, but it brings the gender card, the same old, you know, blaming. This guy has been, you should listen to him. I listened to him at the AU last year. He started speaking, hush, everybody was listening to him. He has a presence. So nobody can tell me that Grace Mugabe, who was his wife, played a very strategic or critical role in bringing Zimbabwe to his knees. Let's blame, he was head of state. I mean, if even she were, why did he allow her to do that? So,
Okay.
I mean, we should stop banding her name around and, you know, whatever. What they said she's what?
Gucci Grace.
Gucci Grace and all the you know,
Yes.
jokes. And
To say that she's ostentatious.
Yeah, that she's ostentatious. I mean, there may be some justification, but at the end of the day, he as head of state has the sole responsibility of leading that, of leading Zimbabwe, and Grace should not be blamed for
Right.
where Zimbabwe is.
So